They sat me by the kitchen at my brother's wedding, in a chair that wobbled every time a server passed by. "She doesn't run anything," his bride whispered, loud enough for everyone to hear. My mother fixed a flower. My father looked away. My brother? He toasted like nothing happened. They thought they'd silenced me, forgotten I held the pen they needed, the one signature that could save their precious merger. I didn't argue, I didn't flinch. I smiled. Then I made a call. 3 words. And just like that, I set the match. You think that was the end? No, that was the beginning. The morning of Lucas's wedding was crisp, the kind of cold that clung to your skin no matter how expensive the fabric. Evelyn stepped out of the black car with precision, not confidence, not anxiety, but control. The Moore family was known for optics, and she wouldn't give them a single wrinkle in their picture-perfect narrative. Her heels clicked softly against the marble walkway leading to the Fairchild estate. Cameras flashed, heads turned, but not toward her. They never did. Inside, the ballroom was every bit the luxury spectacle she expected. Cascading orchids, candlelight curated to match the sunset, servers gliding like ghosts. Sabrina's fingerprints were everywhere. Evelyn scanned the room instinctively. Familiar faces, all carefully arranged in their proper places. The smiling executives, the perfumed aunts, the country club uncles. It was theatrical. She almost admired it. She walked toward the welcome table, where a staff member smiled politely, flipping through the thick binder of assigned seating. Evelyn waited. 30 seconds, then 60. The girl frowned, flipped again. "I'm sorry, Miss Moore, I don't see your name." Evelyn didn't react. She simply lowered her voice. "Check again. Evelyn Moore." Another flip, another pause. "You've been placed at table 14. She gestured vaguely. "It's just through there, toward the kitchen." The word landed like a soft slap. She thanked her, walked past clusters of guests clinking glasses, past golden place cards with gilded names and floral swans. Table 14 was next to the service entrance, close enough that the door thudded every time a tray of food went out. 2 servers sat there, mid-break. One of them jumped when he saw her, standing abruptly. She waved him off gently and sat. The chair wobbled. The first wave of heat rose behind her eyes, but she blinked it away. She didn't come for comfort. She came to be seen, and now she was being erased in plain sight. Then came the voice. "She doesn't run anything. Let her eat with the staff." Smooth, polished, intentionally loud. Evelyn turned slightly. Sabrina stood with a flute of champagne in hand, one perfectly sculpted eyebrow arched. Lucas stood beside her, blank-faced. Their friends laughed, not too loud, not cruel, but enough. Her mother Barbara was fussing with a centerpiece. Her father sipped from his glass, eyes on the dance floor. No one flinched, no one defended her, not even Lucas, especially not Lucas. Evelyn's jaw didn't tighten, her shoulders didn't rise. Instead she smiled, a small, dangerous smile, because what none of them knew, not Lucas, not Sabrina, not her own parents, was that the wedding they were so proud of, the orchestra they paid double for, the imported wine, the crystal, the entire illusion, was bankrolled by an investment she secured 3 months ago. A silent partner, hidden behind a holding firm, had wired 7 figures into Moretech just in time to stop a collapse. That wire? That was her doing. She'd saved them. And now they were seating her beside the swinging door. It was almost poetic. The servers returned, now awkward, unsure how to approach. One of them whispered, "Would you like a drink, ma'am?" She nodded once. Water. Lucas caught her eye from across the room, just for a second, long enough to see if she'd cause a scene. She didn't. She broke eye contact first, on purpose. She looked down at her linen napkin. It wasn't folded into a swan. No flowers, no name card. They had made their choice, but so had she, and none of them knew what was coming. Evelyn lifted her glass of water, clear and quiet, and took a slow sip. She set it down with surgical calm, not a ripple on her face. Around her, laughter rose again, Lucas raising his glass, Sabrina leaning into a polished joke. Her father chuckled. Her mother offered a half-hearted smile to a distant cousin. Table 14 might as well have been a different universe. Evelyn reached for her clutch. Sleek black leather, custom-made, quiet like everything else about her. She slipped it open, her fingers moving with the steadiness of muscle memory. Her thumb hovered for a second over her phone screen, not because of hesitation, but because she wanted to remember the silence. The moment before the match. She tapped once, a message thread, 3 lines deep. She typed, "Pull the deal, today." Sent. No drama, no explosion, just digital clarity. Seconds later, her screen lit up with a simple reply. Understood, moving. Evelyn locked her phone, placed it gently back into her clutch, and sat still. The violins swelled across the room. Sabrina was now greeting a foreign investor's daughter with air kisses and staged delight. Lucas looked victorious, like a man who believed he'd won both the girl and the kingdom. And just like that, Evelyn had taken the kingdom away. The $30 million merger that Lucas had paraded in front of the press for months, dead, not just stalled, restructured, diverted, absorbed. The Voss Group would never touch Mortec again, because the contract was no longer with Mortec. It was being redrafted under Evelyn's private entity, ready to be announced in 72 hours, under a new name, new structure, and zero involvement from Lucas Moore. While Sabrina smiled in her designer gown, Evelyn's legal team had already sent termination papers to Voss Global's lawyers. While Lucas raised his champagne, their operating accounts were being flagged for compliance failure. While Barbara fussed over the flowers, the lifeline that had kept their entire corporate empire from drowning had just been ripped away. Not out of spite, out of precision. Evelyn stood up, one smooth movement. Her chair wobbled behind her, unbalanced on the uneven floor. She didn't fix it. Let them notice later. As she passed through the ballroom, conversations faltered, subconsciously, not dramatically. No one understood yet what had shifted, but they would. Evelyn walked like someone who had just rewritten the story and left everyone else stuck on the wrong page. Lucas turned, sensing her movement, their eyes locked. He tilted his head slightly as if to ask, "Are you leaving already?" She gave him a nod, not goodbye, not surrender, just a warning. Sabrina caught the glance, her perfect smile flickering for the briefest second. It was enough. Evelyn didn't look back. She passed the marble columns, the meticulously arranged dessert table, the photographer angling for candids. The doorman opened the grand entrance without a word. Outside, the autumn air hit her like truth, brisk, unflinching, clean. A black town car idled at the curb. She didn't rush. Inside the car, she removed her shoes one heel at a time, not out of exhaustion, but release. She looked out the tinted window. Behind her the illusion still glittered, but it was hollow now. The foundation cracked the moment she pressed send. Her driver glanced in the rearview mirror. "Back to the tower, Miss Moore." She didn't smile. No. A pause. Home. And for the first time that day, Evelyn exhaled, not from fatigue, but from freedom. The woman they thought they'd buried at table 14? She had just walked out with their empire. Evelyn had always been the quiet one. At least, that's how her relatives described her. So composed, they would say, with forced smiles at family functions, their eyes already drifting toward Lucas, who always arrived 5 minutes late and still stole the show. Evelyn arrived on time, remembered birthdays, helped clean up afterward. But Lucas, he cracked a joke, and suddenly the room revolved around him. She was 8 the first time she noticed the difference. She came home with a first-place ribbon from the state science fair, blue, shiny, fluttering in her small hand. Her mother glanced at it and said, "That's nice, sweetie," before turning to remind Lucas to put on his soccer cleats. That weekend, he scored a single goal and they threw him a backyard barbecue. Evelyn ate her microwave dinner on the porch. It became routine. Report cards came back, hers spotless, his mediocre. Her father barely looked up from the financial pages when she mentioned being elected class president. When Lucas scraped by with a B- in algebra, they hired him a private tutor and said, "We just want him to have every advantage." She didn't resent him then. Not really. It was like resenting gravity. Some things just were. But over time, the weight accumulated. There was the time Lucas crashed the family car after sneaking out. Evelyn got the lecture about responsibility. The time he hosted an unsanctioned party while their parents were travelling, Evelyn was blamed for not keeping an eye on him, even when she was across the country at college. Still, she stayed quiet. She studied harder, got internships, took night classes, graduated summa cum laude while working 2 jobs. When Moretech entered its expansion phase, she offered to help. She built process maps, cost forecasts, even introduced automation tools. Her father barely skimmed the documents. "We've got people for that," he said. Then he hired Lucas as Director of Strategic Partnerships at 24. And yet something had almost changed. She had nearly been named heir. It was 2 years after their father, Howard, had suffered his first stroke. Evelyn was already running internal operations in practice, unofficially unpaid. Lucas was busy networking, golfing, appearing in press photos. Howard, finally noticing the numbers, called her in for a private conversation. "I'm thinking of naming you interim CEO," he had said, voice lower than she'd ever heard it. "Just until Lucas matures into the role, you're the only one who sees the full picture." She nodded, didn't celebrate, just absorbed it, like every other responsibility she'd been handed quietly. But it never happened. A week later, the board had an unscheduled meeting. Evelyn wasn't invited. She found out the results through an internal memo. Lucas would be groomed for CEO. Evelyn would be a strategic consultant. No title, no vote. The explanation? "Perception," her father said later, not meeting her eyes. "Investors need to see stability. Lucas has the more face." She nodded again. Because what else was there to do? She didn't yell. She didn't protest. She just filed that moment away with all the others. But that meeting, silent, surgical, final, was the day something cracked. Not her heart. That had calcified years ago. It was her belief that merit could ever win over legacy. And from that day forward, Evelyn stopped trying to be chosen. She started planning to choose herself. The first time Evelyn stepped back into Moretech after her father's death, the building felt smaller. Not physically, if anything, the office had expanded with glass partitions and open workspaces, but the spirit of it, the gravity, had shrunk. Howard Moore had built Moretech from his garage and made it into a legacy, but with him gone, it felt more like a set piece than a company. Lucas took the CEO title like a crown he assumed was always his. There was no ceremony, just an email to staff, a photo on the website, and a short video message thanking the board for their confidence. Evelyn wasn't mentioned. The company was already in trouble. She knew it the moment she looked at the financial reports Lucas sent her, just to loop you in. The numbers were off. Overhead had ballooned. Vendor contracts had hidden escalators. Morale was slipping. Still, she didn't scold or gloat. She rolled up her sleeves, quietly, as always. She came in nights and weekends, met with department heads without press, and asked one-on-one questions no one else had bothered to ask. She mapped out redundancies, streamlined logistics, and corrected months of forecasting errors. It wasn't glamorous work, but it kept the lights on. Lucas thanked her with a bottle of wine and a company sweatshirt 2 sizes too large. "Appreciate the assist," he said, like she was a temp who'd stayed late. Then things got worse. Cash flow froze. A product launch failed. Rumours swirled about layoffs. Evelyn met with their bank in secret, prepped debt restructuring plans, and reached out to her own network, founders, financiers, venture partners who owed her quiet favours. One by one, they said the same thing. "We trust you, not him." So she created a holding company, shell structure, Delaware registered, untraceable. Through it, she negotiated a silent investment, $12 million in bridge capital, funneled through a third party known to Lucas only as Rybridge Asset Partners. He took the money, barely asked questions. "Godsend," he'd said, grinning like he'd closed the deal himself. He didn't know Evelyn had orchestrated every call, every clause, every zero. He used the money to stabilise operations, paid off vendors, rehired some staff, got back on the conference circuit with pre-rehearsed confidence. The press ran the headline, "More Tech rises again under young CEO." The article quoted Lucas calling it a hard but necessary correction. Not once was Evelyn's name mentioned. She didn't correct them. What was the point? She had saved the company. Again. And again she would be erased from the photo, but this time she wasn't just angry, she was finished. Because this time Evelyn hadn't saved More Tech out of loyalty. She had done it to watch how far they would go without giving her credit, and they had performed exactly as expected. When the company was out of crisis, Lucas stopped returning her messages. She was no longer looped in. Her access to internal reports was revoked. A junior assistant sent her a generic email. "Thank you for your prior contributions. We will reach out if future consultation is needed." She read the message twice, then smiled, because that assistant, the one who sent the brush-off email. Evelyn had personally funded his scholarship when he dropped out of grad school, through a non-profit, under a false name. She could have outed them, demanded her share, burned it all. But that wasn't the plan, no. Evelyn wasn't here for revenge. She was here for clarity. She was done being the architect in the shadows. And now she would build something that didn't require their recognition or their permission. She watched Lucas ride the media wave for months. She watched More Tech inflate with false confidence, mistaking temporary relief for long-term stability. And the whole time, Rybridge Asset Partners, the silent investor, slowly and legally acquired more influence. Because Evelyn didn't just inject capital, she inserted leverage. And no one, not Lucas, not the board, not even the press, realised who was really holding the strings, yet. Evelyn first saw the engagement announcement on the cover of a business magazine at the airport. She was between flights, red-eye to DC, connecting to Chicago for a meeting with a founder she was backing in stealth. She didn't normally read industry fluff, but the headline stopped her cold. More Tech CEO to wed Voss heiress, new era of power couple begins. The photo was obnoxiously polished, Lucas in a tailored navy suit, Sabrina Voss draped at his side, her diamond ring practically screaming through the gloss. Evelyn raised an eyebrow, flipped the magazine open. Inside, it read more like a press release than an article. A strategic alignment of 2 dynasties, it called them. Sabrina was described as the radiant daughter of Warren Voss, and Lucas as the bold visionary reshaping his father's empire. No mention of the near collapse, no whisper of Evelyn. She closed the magazine. So this was it, a marriage for optics. Lucas had always preferred shortcuts. Why work for capital when you could marry it? At first, Evelyn didn't care. Let them merge bedrooms and balance sheets if they wanted. But that changed a few weeks later when she received a folder by mistake. It came from an outside counsel More Tech had used before, a legal firm that Evelyn herself had once connected to the company. A junior paralegal must have added her to the wrong email chain. She opened the attachment on instinct, expecting another routine report. But it wasn't routine. It was the draft of a merger proposal between Moretech and Voss Global, an investment deal in the ballpark of $30 million, structured over multiple phases, aggressive but feasible. Sabrina's father, Warren, was known for precision. He didn't play unless the terms protected his legacy. Evelyn skimmed the clauses, language sharp enough to bleed. Then a line made her pause. Finalization of merger contingent on dual signature approval. Lucas Moore, CEO, and Evelyn Moore, co-founder, board silent partner. Her blood turned to ice. Co-founder, board silent partner. She hadn't held an official title in years. They had gone out of their way to erase her from public documents. Yet somehow, in the fine print of a $30 million deal, her name surfaced like a ghost, refusing to be exorcised. She scrolled back to the sender. No note, no explanation. Just the wrong Evelyn in the CC field. She almost laughed. They were trying to close the deal without even telling her she was part of it. Lucas hadn't called. No board update. No, by the way. He'd planned to walk her into a press conference, hand her a pen, and say, "Sign here," like she was some ceremonial relic, like the family silver, polished and forgotten until needed for a fancy dinner. She read the clause again. Her signature wasn't symbolic. It was structural. Without it, the merger couldn't proceed. Warren Voss had clearly insisted. That meant Warren knew who Evelyn was, which meant Sabrina did too. That explained the silence, the lack of meetings, the strategic invisibility. They hadn't overlooked her. They were trying to control her. Later that night, Evelyn sat in her study, reviewing the full proposal. It was clever. On the surface, the deal looked like a lifeline for Moretech. Capital, connections, visibility. But buried in the appendices were landmines. Contingent clauses about executive decision-making, overrides for strategic shifts, non-compete obligations that could quietly edge Evelyn out of her own influence. And there it was, the real plan. Marry Sabrina, secure the money, use Evelyn's name to close the deal, then erase her for good. The anger didn't rise, not the way it used to. Instead, Evelyn felt something colder, cleaner. This wasn't personal, it was patterned. Lucas had always relied on others to build his image. Her father had trained him to think leadership came with birthright. And now Warren Voss saw Lucas as a puppet worth propping up, as long as Evelyn signed her name beneath his throne. She leaned back in her chair. So that's why they'd called the engagement so quickly. That's why the deal was being pushed through ahead of schedule. Lucas was desperate. And Sabrina? She was pragmatic. The merger was never about love. It was about leverage. And the irony? They'd all forgotten to ask the one person who actually held the pen. The rehearsal dinner was held at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the city. Glass walls, fire pits, string lights glowing like artificial stars. Evelyn arrived precisely on time. Not early enough to be left awkwardly waiting, not late enough to draw attention. She chose a sleek navy dress, elegant but not festive. She was here to observe, not to celebrate. As she entered, she scanned the room. Most of the guests were investors, board members, extended Voss relatives. The seating arrangement was a study in control, power clusters positioned for networking, not sentiment. Lucas stood near the bar, drink in hand, laughing at something Sabrina whispered in his ear. Evelyn didn't wave. She took a seat at the far end of the table, unassigned but unobtrusive. A waiter brought her sparkling water without asking. Of course, her preferences had been on file since her father's retirement dinner years ago. The staff remembered her, even if her own family didn't. Evelyn! The voice was practiced warmth. Sabrina stood beside her, flawless in cream silk, a diamond bracelet catching the light like a threat. She leaned in and air-kissed Evelyn's cheek. "So glad you could make it," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "I know these events can be awkward." "Only when people pretend they're not," Evelyn replied smoothly. Sabrina laughed, too loud. "Well, tonight's about family, right? Even if not everyone's officially included yet." There it was, the edge beneath the polish. Sabrina wasn't being rude, she was being deliberate. Evelyn tilted her head. "I didn't realize I was unofficial." "Oh, I just meant—" Sabrina's tone feigned innocence. "You're so independent. I admire that. Lucas says you've always done your own thing. Not exactly part of the day-to-day." "Depends on which days you're counting," Evelyn said quietly. Before Sabrina could respond, another voice cut through. "Ms. Moore." Warren Voss had approached like a banker out of a spy novel, imposing, precise, his suit cut with almost military severity. He didn't shake hands. He didn't smile. He simply looked at her as though evaluating an asset. "We're counting on your cooperation to make this merger seamless," he said. "No hello, no context, just a statement of expectation." Evelyn didn't blink. "You'll have what you've earned." Warren didn't reply. He nodded once and walked away. Sabrina leaned in again, softer now. "He's intense, I know, but he respects results, and Lucas really believes this merger will honor your father's legacy." Evelyn set down her glass. Interesting word. Honor. What do you think honoring my father looks like? Sabrina paused, just a flicker, but Evelyn saw the falter. Before the silence grew, Lucas appeared, slipping between them like a trained diplomat. "Everything okay here?" "Lovely," Sabrina said, squeezing his arm. "I was just telling Evelyn how crucial she is to this process." Evelyn stood. "Could we speak? Privately?" Lucas glanced at Sabrina, who gave him a theatrical nod. He followed Evelyn to a quiet corner near the balcony, away from the hum of small talk and clinking forks. "What's up?" he asked, tone too casual. Evelyn folded her arms. "You were going to ask me to sign at the wedding, weren't you?" He didn't answer, just looked out at the skyline. "You weren't going to include me in negotiations or strategy. Just a quick photo op, signature, and then silence." Lucas exhaled. "It's complicated." "It's not," Evelyn said. "It's exactly like always. You want the credit. You want the control. But when it comes time to clean up or legitimize something, I'm suddenly useful." Lucas's jaw tightened. Then, after a beat, he looked at her. Really looked. "Dad was going to name you interim CEO." Evelyn blinked. "I convinced him not to," Lucas continued. "I told him you didn't have the temperament, that you wouldn't do what needed to be done, that you weren't ruthless enough." It landed like a blow, one Evelyn hadn't expected to feel. "I thought I was protecting the company," he said. "I thought you'd hate the politics. You thought I wouldn't survive them." Lucas didn't deny it. She looked at him for a long time, then nodded once. "Thanks for the honesty," she said, voice flat. "I'll let you enjoy your dinner." As she walked back to her seat, she didn't feel sad. She felt clarified. They had never truly underestimated her. They'd known exactly what she was capable of. They'd just been afraid of what would happen when she stopped being silent. The email arrived at 6:17 a.m. Evelyn was already awake, seated in her reading chair by the window, cradling a mug of black coffee and staring out at the grey-blue stillness of the city before it stirred. She had planned a day of silence, of quiet preparation, a list of calls to make, documents to review, nothing too loud, nothing final. Then her phone buzzed once, just once. She glanced at it, not expecting anything urgent. Subject: FW signature confirmation request. From Sabrina Voss to Lucas Moore. CC Evelyn Moore, mistakenly. She didn't open it immediately. She took another sip, unhurried. But something about the subject line, it hummed, a kind of premonition. She tapped the screen. The email thread opened. Her eyes scanned down, the way a trained analyst reads a contract, never starting at the top, but diving straight into the middle where people hide the truth. Then she saw it. Once she signs, we're done babysitting her. She'll be irrelevant. Sabrina Voss. No greeting, no professionalism, just a tossed-off cruelty with the confidence of someone who thought Evelyn would never see it. For a moment, Evelyn sat very still. She could hear the radiator clicking softly behind her, the traffic murmuring 3 floors below. The world continued, unaware. She read the sentence again. Not because she didn't understand it, but because she wanted to absorb every molecule of what it meant. It wasn't surprising. Not really. Sabrina had never tried to hide her disdain, but it was the clarity that stung. The confirmation that Evelyn wasn't family, wasn't respected, not even as a partner in a merger she was structurally essential to. She was a hurdle, a checkbox, a liability to be babysat until they got what they needed. Her fingers tightened around the coffee mug, but only briefly. The heat grounded her. Evelyn didn't rage. She didn't scream. She didn't forward the email with fiery words or schedule an emergency confrontation. Instead, she tapped her screen again. Forward to Caleb Harrington. Subject, new leverage, message. Use this quietly and let's talk today. She hit send. Caleb Harrington wasn't just any lawyer. He was her personal counsel, a man with whom she'd worked for almost 6 years. Meticulous, calm, discreet. But he was also something else. A long time ago, briefly, he had been engaged to Sabrina Voss. The engagement hadn't lasted more than a year. Whispers at the time suggested Sabrina had tried to manipulate a corporate tie-in between their families, but Caleb, famously principled, had walked away. No scandal, no press, just silence. Evelyn never asked for details. But now she didn't have to. He'd know what to do, and, more importantly, he would understand the tone of the message. Not revenge, not drama, leverage, the kind that doesn't break things loudly, but reshapes them permanently. She stood, crossed the room, and set her coffee down on the sleek marble credenza. Outside, the sun was beginning to rise properly, sharpening the lines of every building in its path. She had no intention of signing that merger, but now she didn't even need to say no. She would let them continue, let them plan the wedding, finalize flower arrangements, rehearse press statements, pose for photographs, and then, right at the edge of the finish line, she would let the ground disappear beneath them. Caleb replied within 20 minutes. This will be useful. I'll review the merger documents again, particularly the exit clauses and backdoor protections. Suggest we delay any signature indefinitely while we apply internal pressure through Voss's secondary investors. Also, I think you'll find the enclosed quite validating. CH attached was a confidential financial memo Sabrina had authored 6 weeks prior. Caleb had obtained it through one of his internal sources. The document detailed potential consolidation plans post-merger, including staff reductions, brand erasure of Mortec's legacy, and the complete removal of Evelyn from all strategic boards by Q3 of the next fiscal year. She was never meant to be included, only tolerated, until she signed. Then she'd be discarded, quietly, legally, permanently. Evelyn closed the document and sat back down. She wasn't angry anymore. She was grateful. Sabrina had made the mistake so many did. Confusing silence for weakness. Now, Evelyn had proof. She had motive. And, thanks to the same network they had tried to manipulate, she had power. She wouldn't destroy the deal in public. That was too generous. She would unravel it from the inside, with one signature withheld, with one lawyer who knew where all the bones were buried, with one email sent by accident and now archived in 3 different secure backups. She smiled then, not out of spite, but out of recognition. This was the moment everything changed, And the best part? They wouldn't even see it coming. Evelyn had always understood the value of invisibility. Not the kind that made you small, but the kind that made you underestimated, unnoticed, free. While Lucas played CEO under the spotlight, she had built something else entirely, something quiet, durable, untraceable on the surface, but woven deep through the veins of the industries Moretech relied on to breathe. She never named anything after herself. No more holdings, no vanity projects. Everything was coded, filtered through nested LLCs, managed by trusted intermediaries who owed her loyalty not out of obligation, but survival. There was Northgrid Systems, a fintech infrastructure provider that silently powered mid-sized banks with real-time fraud detection. Evelyn had invested in them when they were operating out of a converted laundromat. No one else saw the potential in a team of engineers who couldn't afford a single polished pitch deck, but she did. Then there was Pillacore Logistics, a regional freight optimization network that Evelyn quietly acquired a controlling interest in during the pandemic. They didn't just move goods, they controlled the software that assigned trucks, routes and delivery windows, which meant they didn't just serve Moretech's shipments, they dictated them. And finally, Foundation 13, a non-profit investment fund disguised as an urban development accelerator. It bought undervalued commercial properties and leased them to women-led startups at sub-market rates. The board? All anonymous. The mission? Real. The capital? Evelyn's. None of these entities bore her fingerprints. Not publicly, but they were hers, and they worked, not just as investments, but as leverage. Because Moretech, whether Lucas knew it or not, relied on them. And Evelyn? She was about to remind them exactly how fragile dependence becomes when you forget who you're leaning on. After forwarding Sabrina's email to Caleb, Evelyn made a second call. Not to a lawyer. To Maya Chen, CEO of Pillacore. Maya picked up on the second ring. "I heard about the merger rumours," she said without preamble. "It's real," Evelyn said, "but it won't go through. And when it doesn't, I need your team to initiate the Tier 2 contingency." Maya didn't hesitate. "You're pulling the plug?" "Not all the way," Evelyn said. "Just enough for them to feel the loss." Maya whistled softly. "That's about 40% of their time-sensitive deliveries. You want us to redirect or freeze?" "Freeze, politely. Blame scheduling recalibration." "Got it." "And Maya?" "Yeah? Thank you for trusting me when you didn't have to." "I trust people who show up with capital and ask about childcare before ROI," Maya replied. "We're good." Evelyn hung up. Within 24 hours, Moretech would start experiencing delays. Nothing catastrophic, not yet, but inconvenient, disruptive. Enough to make a few Voss liaisons raise eyebrows. Enough to plant seeds of doubt. She wasn't sabotaging, she was signalling. The power they thought she gave up? She never relinquished it, she just moved it somewhere they didn't think to look. That afternoon, Evelyn sat in a small sunlit cafe on the east side of town, watching pedestrians rush between errands and late lunches. She had no meetings scheduled, no fires to put out, no one hounding her for answers. Lucas thought she had disappeared into bitterness. Sabrina assumed she was clinging to the last threads of influence. Neither realized that she had spent the last 5 years building an empire beneath their feet. And now all she had to do was lift one finger and watch their balance sheets start to shake. The wedding moved like a choreographed ballet. Champagne flowed, strings swelled, laughter circled the air like perfume. To the untrained eye, it was perfect, decadent, harmonious, invincible. Lucas stood near the head table, toasting effortlessly, charming guests with the ease of a man who believed he had secured his future. Sabrina's diamond earrings caught the light as she beamed beside him, her hands resting on his arm like a royal seal of approval. But beneath the surface, cracks had begun to form. Lucas's phone buzzed once in his pocket. He ignored it, then again and again. By the 5th time, his smile faltered. He stepped aside from the group and pulled out his phone, the screen lighting up like a siren. 7 missed calls, 12 unread messages, subject lines, urgent, immediate attention, contract termination, PR response, required. His eyes scanned faster than his brain could process. Investor backing rescinded, Voss Group under review, media leak confirmed, story running at 3 p.m. Shipment freeze from Pillacor, no explanation. Do you have control of Evelyn Moore? That last message hit like a slap. He looked up, eyes darting across the room. Evelyn was nowhere in sight. At the exact moment the officiant called guests to their seats for the vows, Lucas was reading a forwarded contract amendment, one he hadn't authorized. It included a clause Evelyn had added 5 months earlier to an obscure vendor contract tied to digital exclusivity rights, Clause 17.4b. In the event of non-consensual restructuring, all preferential supply agreements will be nullified and reclassified as competitive access. In plain English, Moretech was no longer protected. And worse, Voss Global, by binding itself to the same terms under merger conditions, had just unknowingly triggered an identical clause. Lucas blinked. Evelyn hadn't just cancelled a deal. She'd pulled the pin on an economic grenade that would detonate in both their boardrooms. The wedding music resumed, violins easing into a gentle crescendo as Sabrina began walking down the aisle, radiant and oblivious. Lucas stayed frozen, reading and rereading legal texts he didn't even remember signing. Another alert hit his screen. Breaking, inside Moretech's quiet crisis. Has the merger already collapsed? A journalist he knew, a photo of him and Sabrina under a bold headline. The words insider betrayal in the preview text. His hands trembled. He reached for a glass of champagne, but it was empty. Across the venue, a ripple of confusion passed through a few guests as their phones lit up too. Heads leaning together, whispers intensifying. Warren Voss stood slowly from his seat, looking down at his own phone. His face didn't change, but his posture did, stiffening like a general sensing an ambush. Lucas rushed to him. "Warren, don't believe everything you're reading. It's a misunderstanding. We're managing it." Warren didn't speak. He merely turned his screen toward Lucas. "Evelyn Moore declines to sign merger. Deal void." Below it, a second message. Clause 17.4 activated. Warren's eyes were ice. "You said she was handled." Lucas opened his mouth, but nothing came out. Warren walked past him, quiet and deliberate. His entourage followed. No speech, no apology, just an exit. By the time Sabrina reached the altar, half the VIP guests were already pulling up news articles. Someone gasped. Someone else stood up and left. Lucas tried to smile, to wave, to reclaim the moment, but the moment was already gone, because Evelyn had never needed to shout. She only needed to whisper at the right fault line, and everything above it began to crumble. Warren Voss's exit was not theatrical. He didn't yell, he didn't demand. He simply stood, adjusted his cufflinks, and walked out, followed by his advisors, security detail, and silence. But in a room choreographed for elegance, that silence was deafening. The music stumbled. The officiant hesitated. Sabrina stood at the altar, bouquet trembling, her perfectly glossed smile faltering as she looked toward Lucas for answers. But Lucas wasn't at her side. He was at the edge of the venue, phone pressed to his ear, voice rising in frustration. "No, we didn't authorize any of that. Evelyn doesn't speak for... She's not even..." His words died. The call dropped. Another notification hit his screen. Moretech stock down 12% in pre-market trading. A second. Voss Capital pulls out of joint investment fund. Then another. Vendors request payment guarantees. Rumours of merger collapse spike. And finally, press outside venue. Live coverage starting. Lucas looked around and saw the windows lined with long lens cameras. reporters stationed beyond the private hedges, some already broadcasting. The illusion of control, the illusion of invincibility, was shattering. Sabrina turned toward her father's now empty chair. Her jaw clenched. She dropped the bouquet. Someone in the back whispered, "Should we continue?" Lucas didn't answer. Couldn't. His mind was sprinting through every potential salvage scenario, every contact who might spin the headlines, every legal loophole they could invoke. But it was all unravelling too fast. And Evelyn? Evelyn wasn't there. She had walked away hours earlier. No confrontation, no announcement. Just a quiet, calculated exit, one that had set this avalanche into motion. Back at her penthouse, Evelyn sat on the couch, legs crossed, reading through real-time news updates. A soft jazz playlist played in the background. The headlines were exactly as she'd predicted. Then her phone vibrated. "Unknown number, flagged as secure," she answered. A deep voice greeted her, familiar, calm. "Miss Moore, I assume you're watching?" "I am," she replied. "I believe the time has come." She smiled slightly. "Are you making an offer?" "Yes, for your full equity stake in Moretech. We'll handle the board negotiations, but the structure is clean. No hidden clause. You walk away with triple market value and total freedom." "And the condition?" she asked, though she already knew. "No Lucas." "Of course." The voice belonged to Desmond Hale, a private equity strategist with a reputation for surgical acquisitions. 3 years ago, he'd pitched a minor collaboration with Moretech during a tech sustainability summit. Lucas had laughed him out of the room, called his proposal amateur hour in front of half the industry. Desmond hadn't flinched. He'd simply nodded and walked away. But Evelyn had remembered him. He was quiet, brilliant, and, more importantly, he didn't care about appearances. He cared about structure, sustainability, and long games. They'd met for coffee twice since then. Nothing formal, just conversations. Evelyn had listened more than she spoke. And now, when Moretech was bleeding and Lucas was flailing, Desmond was back, with a lifeline. "I want your terms in writing," Evelyn said. "You'll have them in an hour. But know this, our deal only works if the leadership vacuum is absolute. We won't step in to patch holes if the hole maker is still in the building." Evelyn nodded, though he couldn't see her. "I understand." "And Evelyn?" "Yes? I've waited a long time to work with someone who saw what I saw." She didn't reply immediately. But when she did, her voice was quiet steel. "Then let's show them what happens when the invisible heir becomes the architect." She ended the call and leaned back. The markets would open in 20 minutes. Lucas still had time to lie, to spin, to deflect. But the truth was already circulating. Investors don't need full evidence to panic. They just need signals. And Evelyn had sent all the right ones. The media would eat the wedding alive. The stock would tumble. The board would call emergency meetings. Some would blame her. Others would beg her to return. But it was too late. She didn't want Moretech anymore. She didn't want the seat at the table. She wanted the floor plans to the building. And now she had them. The call came at 11:43 p.m. Evelyn was still in her office, though she wasn't working. The lights were dimmed, a glass of water half full beside her, untouched. The city pulsed below, bright and oblivious. She had turned the TV off hours ago. The news coverage was predictable. Some celebrated her move as brilliant, others labelled her vindictive. She didn't care. She had waited years for this silence, the kind that wasn't emptiness, but aftermath. The phone rang again. She answered without looking at the screen. She already knew. "Evelyn." Her mother's voice was frayed, not furious, not weeping, just confused. "Hi, Mom." A pause. I don't even know where to start." "Then don't," Evelyn replied, voice even. Barbara Moore sighed, the way someone does when they've lost control of a narrative they thought they owned. "Why would you do this? To your brother? To us?" Evelyn let the silence stretch. Then, because you let me sit by the kitchen. Her mother inhaled sharply, but didn't interrupt. Evelyn continued. Not just at the wedding. Every year, every dinner, every milestone. I wasn't invisible. You just looked past me. I didn't know. You did, Evelyn said, not harshly. You knew exactly what you were doing every time you turned away, when he got praise and I got silence. When I brought home awards and you said, don't show off. When Dad told me I wasn't the face Mortec needed, and you agreed. Barbara's voice broke. That wasn't about you. It was always about me, Evelyn interrupted, quiet but firm. Just never for the reasons you were proud of. Another long pause. I lost your father, Barbara whispered. I thought keeping the company in the family through Lucas. He wasn't the only family, Evelyn said. You just decided he was the only one that counted. Silence again. But this time her mother didn't fight it. Then her voice returned, lower, almost a whisper. There's something I need to give you. Something I should have given you a long time ago. Evelyn blinked. What? A letter from your father after his last hospital stay. He wrote to you. I only saw it once. And then it disappeared. Her stomach tightened. Disappeared? I assumed he'd changed his mind, or maybe it got lost. But today, Lucas's assistant dropped it by. He found it in a drawer, folded into an old investor packet. The air shifted. I'm sending you a photo now. Evelyn pulled the phone away, watched the message come through. It was a photo of a handwritten letter, folded once, slightly creased, dated a week before Howard Moore's death. She zoomed in and began to read. Evelyn, I've made more mistakes than I can count. Most I can live with, but not this one. You were always the architect, the steady hand. I told myself that Lucas needed the title more than you did, that you'd understand. I was wrong. You should have led this company. Not because you're my daughter, but because you're the best person I've ever worked beside. If you're reading this, then I didn't get the chance to fix it. I hope one day you forgive me. Or at least remember that I saw you, even if too late. Dad. Evelyn's eyes didn't water, but something inside her shifted. Her voice was even when she asked, How long has Lucas had this? I don't know, Barbara replied. He didn't say. Of course not. Lucas had known. He had read this, and he still let the world believe Evelyn was unworthy of leadership. Still made that speech about her being better behind the scenes. Still pretended the erasure was structural, not personal. Evelyn stood, her spine straightening. Thank you for sending it, she said to her mother. Evelyn... She waited. I'm sorry, Barbara whispered. I know. And then she ended the call. She walked across the office to the floor-to-ceiling windows, phone still in hand, the letter glowing faintly on the screen. She didn't need the apology. What she needed was already hers, the truth. It had just arrived too late to save their version of the family, but not too late to build something better. Lucas stood alone at the podium, the Mortec logo shining faintly on the backdrop behind him. The press conference had been scheduled for noon, but it was nearly 12:30 and the room was still mostly empty. A scattering of junior reporters occupied the back row, checking their phones more than their notepads. No major outlets had sent anyone. CNBC cancelled last minute. Bloomberg sent a camera crew, but only to collect B-roll. He adjusted his tie, wiped his brow, smiled. There was no applause, no buzz, just the quiet hum of a dying empire trying to revive itself. Thank you for coming, he began, trying to inject warmth into his voice. I know the last few days have been difficult for our investors, our partners, our family, but Mortec remains committed to transparency, innovation, and resilience. He paused, waiting for the usual camera flashes. Nothing. We've experienced an unexpected disruption in the merger process with Voss Global, but we're actively pursuing alternatives. Our fundamentals are strong, and our team is united. Another pause. Then the first question came, from a blogger in the second row. Is it true that Evelyn Moore declined to sign because of misrepresented financial statements? Lucas hesitated. We're not commenting on internal family decisions, he said, forcing a chuckle. Another reporter chimed in. Is it also true that Clause 17.4b in the North Grid Agreement was deliberately buried to bypass regulatory review? That one landed harder. Lucas swallowed. That's not accurate. The clause was standard legal language. Then why is North Grid freezing all affiliate support? A third voice, sharper. Can you explain why multiple vendors have cited trust concerns? Lucas's smile cracked. He reached for the water at the podium. We're navigating through a complex moment, he said. That was when the door opened. Everyone turned. A woman walked in, calm, purposeful. She wasn't Evelyn, but she carried the kind of silence that shifted a room. Her name was Andrea Slate, senior board member, former chief risk officer, known for her integrity, respected for her bluntness. She had stood by Lucas after Howard's death, had even defended the merger early on. But now she stepped up to the podium, ignoring the reporters and facing Lucas directly. I'm sorry, she said, but this needs to be said. Lucas blinked. Andrea, what are you... She held up a tablet. We've completed an internal audit, not because you asked for one, but because we had to. And what we found isn't just disappointing, it's dangerous. The room froze. Offshore shell invoices, double-billed consulting fees, suppressed vendor performance reports, all authorized under your oversight. Lucas paled. That's a misinterpretation. Those were... Evelyn flagged them last year, Andrea said. You dismissed her. The reporters started typing. Let's be clear, Andrea continued, now addressing the room. Evelyn Moore didn't destroy this company. She tried to protect it, and you ignored her, mocked her, marginalized her. A flash went off. Lucas Moore is no longer fit to lead. The sentence echoed, final, clean. Lucas stepped back, hand trembling. You're siding with her? Andrea nodded. I'm siding with the truth. More flashes. The press conference was no longer his. He left without answering another question. Back at her office, Evelyn didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She simply closed her laptop as the live stream ended and whispered to herself, It's done. She hadn't leaked the audit. She hadn't needed to. All she had done was let the truth rise, on its own, unforced, like a tide. And it had carried her forward while sweeping everything else away. The city was gold in the late afternoon, bathed in soft light that made everything look cleaner, quieter, better than it really was. From the 49th floor of the Evelyn Group's headquarters, the skyline looked like a promise fulfilled. Evelyn stood at the window, her reflection overlaying the glass like a ghost she'd finally made peace with. Behind her, the office moved in gentle hums, phones ringing, people walking briskly but calmly, a rhythm of something built with care. Her name was on the building now, not just on the door, on the foundation, on the contracts, on the legacy. She hadn't taken more tech, she had outgrown it. The Evelyn Group wasn't built on revenge, it was built on refusal. Refusal to be erased, ignored, underestimated, refusal to wait for permission. And now every floor beneath her feet held the weight of her choices. She sipped from a glass of water, not wine, and glanced down toward the plaza. A wedding was taking place in the courtyard of a boutique hotel across the street. Not extravagant, not massive, just beautiful. A couple stood beneath a white trellis wrapped in vines, hands clasped, eyes locked. Friends clapped quietly. No photographers, no headlines, just sincerity. She watched them for a long moment. The way the bride laughed when the wind caught her veil, the way the groom kissed her hand before slipping the ring on, the way no one tried to outshine each other, love without performance, something Evelyn had never seen modelled. A knock on her office door pulled her gently back. It was Kira, one of her younger strategy analysts, bright, eager, loyal. The kind of employee who stayed late not out of pressure, but belief. "Sorry to interrupt," Kira said. "The Sydney call's been pushed, and I dropped the final projections on your desk." "Thank you," Evelyn said, turning slightly. Kira hesitated. Then, eyes flicking toward the window and the wedding below, she asked, "Do you ever think about forgiving them?" Evelyn smiled, just faintly. "My family?" Kira nodded. "I mean, everything you've done since. It's incredible. But do you ever think about going back, talking it out?" Evelyn didn't answer right away. She set her glass down, walked slowly to her desk, picked up a pen, turned it once in her fingers. Then she looked at Kira and said calmly, clearly, "I wasn't born to sit by the kitchen. I was born to own the building." Kira didn't speak. She didn't need to. The weight of those words settled into the room like bricks clicking into place. Evelyn continued, her tone not bitter, just matter of fact. "They thought power came from being chosen, from being invited to the table. But I stopped waiting for a seat. I built my own table. Then I bought the building that table sat in. And now, if I choose to forgive, it won't be because they deserve it. It'll be because I've moved so far beyond their reach, they can't touch me even with apology." Kira's eyes widened, not in fear, but in awe. Then she smiled. "I'll make sure no one disturbs you for the next hour." As the door clicked shut behind her, Evelyn sat down, not heavily, not in fatigue, but like a woman who had finally stepped fully into her own space. She pulled up her next project brief, a new fund for female-led infrastructure ventures in underrepresented cities. No headlines, no need for press tours, just quiet power, redistributed intentionally. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw the bride and groom embrace. The guests threw flower petals. The music lifted briefly, carried by wind. She didn't envy them, but she wished them well. Because love, when built with truth, was its own kind of empire. She had hers, not made of glass ceilings, but steel reinforcements she poured herself. "Sedem dvo viet ju jung isid stotu. Va viet theodan isau dan I viet lan dva chuong sebem, twist quoi. Evelyn Jang Chuan Bira Matmod Kwijautu, Laiten the Forgotten Daughters Fund, Hotro Punu Bigat Botrongia Jinhva King Doan. Truyen Kep Lai Bangmod Toast, Kong Fai Champagne Malanuok Lok, to clarity, Viet Truyen Ken Tri Jan Noi." The following morning, Evelyn arrived at the office early, before the elevators filled, before inboxes overflowed. The light was still soft, casting long lines across her floor-to-ceiling windows, and the city below hadn't yet remembered how loud it could be. She walked the quiet hallway of the executive wing barefoot, heels in hand, letting her skin touch the floors of the empire she built, not in ceremony, but in ownership. In her private conference room, folders were arranged on the glass table, each marked with clean silver lettering, the Forgotten Daughters Fund. She ran her hand lightly across the top folder. This wasn't just another venture. It was personal, purposeful. This was for every girl who got told to be quiet while her brother was celebrated. For every woman who rebuilt companies behind the scenes and was handed flowers while someone else took the stage. For every daughter invited to family dinners only to be seated at the edge, not by mistake, but by design. This fund wasn't about revenge. It was about redirection. She had poured $50 million of her own capital into the foundation. No outside investors, no governance boards full of men in grey suits, just women, strategists, builders, dreamers, who had seen the inside of closed doors and decided to make their own. The mission was clear: fund companies led by women with no last names of consequence. Back ideas overlooked for being too niche, too domestic, too quiet. Prioritise founders who had been passed over, not because they weren't qualified, but because they weren't expected to be powerful. Her assistant Naomi stepped into the room holding a tray. "Everyone's in place for the private roundtable," she said. "Founders are in the lounge, team is ready, and your signature toast setup is here." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "The signature toast?" Naomi smiled. "Water, as requested." Evelyn let out a quiet laugh. At the head of the table, a single tall glass of water sat, crystalline and untouched. No flutes, no champagne, no show, just water, clean, unpretentious, necessary. As the women began filtering into the room, diverse in age, background, industry, Evelyn greeted each with eye contact, and something rarer than praise, acknowledgement. These weren't women who needed to be inspired, they needed to be seen. The meeting began not with a pitch, but with a story, hers. She told them about the science fair ribbon no one framed, the internships no one asked about, the boardroom seat she earned but was never offered, the kitchen table at her brother's wedding. She didn't say their names, she didn't have to. These women already knew. They had lived it too, in their own versions. Then Evelyn explained the fund, the terms, the autonomy, the expectations, not for perfection, but for persistence. She told them this was not charity. It was not optics, it was capital, and capital meant choice. When she finished, she lifted her glass, not high, not performatively, just enough, and she said simply, "To clarity." The room followed suit. Dozens of glasses of water rose quietly. No applause, no spectacle. Just understanding, because clarity was what had saved her. Clarity that waiting for validation was not strength. Clarity that power could be quiet and still permanent. Clarity that being pushed aside did not mean you were supposed to stay there. The toast marked a beginning, not of war, but of wisdom passed on. After the meeting, Evelyn stood alone once more by the window, watching the city pulse beneath her. In another building, her brother was probably trying to explain away the latest headlines. Her mother might be on a PR call, asking how best to frame their side. Maybe someone from Moortech was drafting a comeback strategy. But none of that mattered, because Evelyn wasn't coming back. She hadn't just left the table. She had built the blueprint for something else entirely. And now she was passing it on, quietly, powerfully, permanently, one forgotten daughter at a time,